The Pacific sun had a way of bleaching everything: corrugated roofs, prison uniforms, even the memories of who a man used to be before capture. On the western edge of Fukuoka POW Camp No. 2, American Staff Sergeant Walter H. Reeves stood beside a mound of twisted aluminum from downed aircraft, staring at the scrap as if it were trying to whisper its secrets back to him. The other prisoners thought he was losing his mind. The Japanese guards were certain of it. But Reeves, thin, leathery, and quiet enough to seem invisible, was studying the metal like a man who still believed he might matter in a world that had tried to shrink him. He lifted a jagged strip of fuselage, tested its weight in his trembling hands, and whispered, "You flew once. Maybe you can help us fly again." No one heard him. No one needed to. The aircraft scrap knew exactly what he meant. 3 months into captivity, nothing surprised the guards anymore. Not the sick, not the dying, and not the strange American with the eyes that never rested. What did surprise them was that he never begged, never cursed, never raged. Reeves simply carried a quiet, stubborn rhythm inside him, as if survival itself were a craft he had practiced long before the war. A sergeant named Nakamura approached from behind, rifle slung over his shoulder. "Reeves," he barked in broken English. "Why you always look at scrap? It is trash, dead metal." Reeves didn't answer immediately. He never did. The silence made Nakamura uneasy because it wasn't fear, it was calculation. Finally, Reeves spoke. "Metal's only dead when we stop imagining what it can do." Nakamura rolled his eyes. Americans think trash is magic." Reeves almost smiled. "Almost. Only when we're desperate." Nakamura snorted and walked away, shaking his head. The other guards would mock the American later. They called him Ghost Mechanic, a man tinkering with nothing, inventing illusions to distract himself from hunger. Let him pretend, they'd say. A starving man has to choose between hope and madness. Reeves had chosen hope, and that was suspicious enough. But the quiet man had his reasons. Before the crash, he had been an aviation ordnance specialist, an engineer with hands that understood machines better than people. When he was 12, he built a slingshot so precise it could knock a walnut off a fence post from 50 feet away. When he was 15, he turned broken tractor parts into a self-oiling chain tensioner for his father's workshop. He had always seen possibilities in the discarded. Now, surrounded by the refuse of fallen aircraft, he saw something else: a way to protect his fellow prisoners, even if no one, including the Japanese, believed such a thing was possible. Chapter 2. That night, under the single dull bulb of Barrack 7, Reeves sat on his bunk, scratching lines into the floorboards with a nail, his closest friend in the camp. Corporal Frank Delaney leaned over. "You drawing another blueprint of that doohickey you keep whispering about?" Delaney asked, voice low. Reeves kept scratching. "Not a blueprint, a thought. You've been thinking for weeks. What does the great mind say now?" Reeves looked up. His eyes were sunken but sharp. "That we're not helpless." Delaney blinked. "We're prisoners, Walt. Our biggest weapon is not dying before breakfast." "Not true," Reeves said softly. "We have scrap." Delaney groaned. "Oh no, not this again." Reeves finished his carving, a rough schematic of tubes, angles, and pressure lines, then wiped the dust from his palms. "You see this piece?" Reeves pointed. "Aluminum conduit from a hydraulic line. And this part here vented intake tubing from a downed Zero." So Reeves whispered, leaning closer. "If you harness compressed airflow through a narrow channel, you create thrust. If you load that channel with bearings from the railroad shop," Delaney sat straight up. "Walt, are you telling me you're trying to build a gun?" "Not a gun," Reeves corrected. "A compressed air scrap launcher." Delaney stared. "A what?" "A weapon made entirely from aircraft scrap. No powder, no heat, just pressure and velocity. A way to fire metal projectiles without attracting attention." Delaney exhaled. "Walt, the guards already think you're planning something. You'll get us all shot." "Not if they never understand what it is," Reeves said. "To them it'll look like a piece of pipe, trash, dead metal." Delaney rubbed his face. "And what exactly would this scrap gun save us from hunger?" Cold Reeves looked around the barracks, counting each gaunt face. "Raids," he said. Delaney froze. "You think the Americans will attack this camp?" "Maybe not Americans. Maybe guerrilla groups. Maybe rogue units. Maybe supply thieves. The war's turning messy. If an attack comes, we have nothing, no protection. And these men, Reeves's voice cracked for the first time, they deserve something. Delaney softened. You can't save everybody. Maybe not, Reeves said, but we can save someone. Two days later, Reeves approached Nakamura during scrap sorting duty. I need a length of intact tubing, Reeves said plainly. Nakamura narrowed his eyes. For what? Reeves shrugged, trying to appear indifferent. Improved sorting efficiency. If I can use tubing to push smaller pieces into bins, I can clear scrap faster. You want that correct? Nakamura considered this. Productivity pleased his superiors. A tool that required no oversight. Even better. Fine, Nakamura grunted, handing him a 3-foot tube. But if you break, you fix. Reeves bowed slightly. Deal. As he walked away, several guards laughed. Look, the American plays machine again. He thinks he can build things from garbage. Ghost mechanic dreams. Reeves ignored them. He wasn't building a dream. He was building survival. The first prototype failed spectacularly. Reeves shoved a wooden dowel into the makeshift barrel and pumped air through a crude intake valve. The dowel shot out, ricocheted off a metal wall, and smacked Delaney in the thigh. Oh, Walt. Good, Reeves muttered. Too much dispersion. Needs tighter seals. Too much dispersion. You just attacked me with a tree branch. Reeves shook his head. We'll switch to bearing soon. This is just proof of concept. Delaney limped away, muttering. But Reeves kept going. His knuckles cracked open from scraping metal. His ribs jutted out like broken slats in a fence. His voice thinned to a whisper from dehydration. Still he persisted, because men were dying and he refused to let fate decide their last breath. One evening, Nakamura approached unexpectedly and found Reeves hunched over a pile of tubing, shaping a nozzle by rubbing it against concrete. What you do? Nakamura asked. Reeves didn't look up, making the scrap sorter more efficient. Nakamura crouched, studying the parts. This not scrap sorter. Reeves finally looked him in the eye. What do you think it is? Nakamura hesitated. I think you build something strange. It's just trash, Reeves said calmly. You said it yourself. Nakamura stared at him for a long moment, searching for deceit. He found none because Reeves wasn't lying. It was trash. Trash arranged with purpose. Do not cause trouble, Reeves, Nakamura warned. I won't, Reeves said, and he meant it. Trouble wasn't the goal. Protection was. When Nakamura walked away, Reeves returned to his work breath, shallow hands trembling. He was close now, so close he could feel the curvature of possibility tightening like a drum inside his chest. The night of the typhoon changed everything. Rain hammered the barracks. Lightning flickered across the compound like artillery shadows, and amid the storm's roar, Reeves heard something else, the unmistakable crunch of boots, but not Japanese boots. Too heavy, too disorganized, too desperate. Delaney rushed in, breathless. Walt, we've got raiders, bandits, or deserters coming through the east wall. Reeves stood up slowly. The storm rattled the tin roof. The men panicked around him. For a moment, time narrowed into a single, quiet line. This was the moment he had been building toward. He lifted the finished device from under his bunk, 3 feet of scrap tubing, reinforced rings, a pressure valve fashioned from a Zero's hydraulic coupling. A weapon no one believed in. A weapon no guard understood. A weapon built entirely from what war had thrown away. Delaney stared at it. This is insane. Reeves met his eyes. Maybe, but insanity might be the only thing that keeps them alive tonight. As thunder cracked overhead, Reeves stepped into the rain, gripping the aircraft scrap gun like a man holding on to his final truth. The Japanese guards watched him with confusion, then disbelief, and before dawn broke they would watch something else, something that would change everything they thought they knew about the quiet American who saw life inside dead metal. The typhoon was the kind that swallowed sound. Sheets of rain fell in diagonal strokes, carving the night into flickering slices of gray and black. Wind screamed through the gaps in the barracks walls, shaking the camp like a dying aircraft rattling apart in midair. Every man, American, Australian, Filipino, British, huddled inside Barrack 7, felt the same sickening truth. If raiders breached the perimeter, they would butcher the prisoners for supplies before the guards even regrouped. Reeves didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked into the storm the way a mechanic approaches an engine that refuses to die. Calm, deliberate, eyes sharp. The aircraft scrap gun hung at his side like a tool, not a weapon. That alone made the Japanese guards uneasy. Sergeant Nakamura emerged from his watchpost soaked to the bone. "Reeves," he yelled over the wind. "Get inside!" "You crazy!" Reeves pointed toward the east fence. In the strobing lightning silhouettes moved 6, maybe 7 figures scaling the wall using the storm as cover. "Raiders," Reeves said simply. Nakamura's jaw tightened. "You stay behind guards. You prisoner." Reeves shook his head once. "They'll kill the prisoners first, and then you." Nakamura froze, not at the words, but at the eerie calmness of them. Reeves wasn't threatening him. He was stating a fact. Thunder rolled. Something metal clanged near the fence as the intruders forced open a loose panel. Shouts, English but not American, rose through the rain. These weren't soldiers. They were scavengers in tattered uniforms, survivors of broken regiments who roamed the hills for food. And desperate men with empty stomachs were the most dangerous of all. Reeves took position behind a rain barrel, bracing the scrap gun against his shoulder like he'd practiced in his mind 1,000 times. Nakamura stared at the odd weapon. "That pipe. You think that work?" Reeves didn't look at him. "It'll work," Nakamura scoffed. "Impossible. Trash cannot save you." Reeves adjusted the valve. "Tonight it might save all of us." The first raider leapt into the compound, machete raised. A second followed with a bolt-action rifle rusted and unreliable. They sprinted towards the dim glow of the barracks where hungry men slept. Reeves inhaled, once slow, steady, letting the storm sharpen his senses. Then he opened the valve. A fierce burst of compressed air blasted through the tubing, propelling a cluster of metal bearings down the smooth barrel and out into the rain-soaked night. The projectile stream struck the lead raider across the ribs with a metallic crack. He dropped instantly, sliding across the mud in shock and agony. Nakamura's eyes flew wide. "What? What is that?" Reeves didn't answer. He was already rotating, adjusting pressure, reloading with another handful of bearings. Peesh, thwack! The second raider stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, howling. The Japanese guards stared in disbelief. They had assumed Reeves was a harmless obsessive, a man who played with trash to keep from losing his mind. Yet here he was, wielding a device built entirely from scrap, an improvised cannon that fired without flame or sound, only the vicious hiss of pressure slicing the rain. The raiders regrouped, startled by the unseen weapon. One fired a wild shot into the storm. The bullet pinged off a metal drum near Reeves, sending sparks. Nakamura ducked. Reeves didn't flinch. He raised the scrap gun again and unleashed another tight burst. Bearings peppered the mud in front of the intruder, forcing him to dive behind a fuel crate. Reeves called out to the Japanese guards. "Flank left, push them toward the fence." The guards hesitated. Obeying a prisoner was unthinkable, but Reeves's weapon was doing what their rifles couldn't, turning chaos into control. Nakamura barked an order. "Move now." A squad of guards dashed to the left, rifles raised. Reeves covered their advance with precise short bursts, each stream of bearings placed exactly where it needed to be, not to kill, but to force the raiders back step by step. This wasn't a soldier fighting. This was a mechanic solving a problem. One raider managed to circle behind a barracks, creeping toward the sleeping prisoners. Reeves spotted him in a flash of lightning, the glint of a blade, the silhouette of intent. Reeves sprinted through the mud lungs, burning. The raider lunged forward, ready to break through a window. "Hey!" Reeves shouted, not to intimidate, but to force the man into a single moment of confusion. The raider turned, and Reeves fired point blank. The burst hit the attacker square in the forearm. He dropped the blade with a choked scream, collapsing into the mud. Reeves stood over him, breath ragged, the scrap gun steaming with condensed fog. The Japanese guards caught up seconds later, rifles trained on the writhing raider. Nakamura stared at Reeves as if seeing him for the first time. "You saved them," he said quietly. "You saved prisoners." Reeves adjusted the valve again, scanning the compound. "Everyone here is trying to survive. Doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on when raiders come." Nakamura swallowed hard. War had taught him many things: obedience, ruthlessness, suspicion, but it had never taught him what to do when an enemy saved his life. The remaining raiders tried to retreat. The storm had turned their attack into a disaster, and Reeves's strange weapon finished the job. They scrambled back toward the hole in the fence. Reeves took a knee, braced the scrap gun, and fired a final sweeping burst across the ground in front of them, just enough to drive them off without killing. Through the rain, the raiders fled into the darkness from which they came. Silence fell, broken only by the wind and the distant crack of thunder. The guards lowered their rifles. The prisoners, who had woken during the chaos, stared from behind the barracks windows wide-eyed. Reeves exhaled and set the scrap gun down gently, like it was something fragile. Maybe it was. The weapon wasn't designed for war. It was designed for saving as many lives as one starving mechanic could reach. Nakamura approached slowly. "You, American, are strange man." Reeves managed a faint grin. "I've been told." Nakamura knelt beside the scrap gun and examined the tubing, the seals, the makeshift pressure chamber. "This, from aircraft scrap, all of it." Nakamura shook his head. "When you ask for tube, I laugh. I tell guards you crazy." Reeves said nothing. Nakamura continued, voice low. "But this night, you save my men. You save your men. You save camp." Reeves looked out across the compound where lightning illuminated the broken fence panel. "No one should die because others think they're worthless." Nakamura stared at him for a long moment. Rain dripped from the brim of his cap. "You prisoner," he said, "but tonight, you commander." Reeves didn't respond. He was too exhausted, too drenched, too hollowed by adrenaline to find words that mattered. The scrap gun had worked beyond anything he had hoped. But the night wasn't over, because news travels fast in a camp starved of hope. And by sunrise, every guard and every prisoner would know the impossible truth. The Japanese never believed his aircraft scrap gun would work until it saved them. Hours later, when the typhoon eased and pale morning filtered through the clouds, Reeves stood under the awning of the tool shed, staring at his creation. It looked like nothing more than a battered piece of tubing patched with scavenged fittings. Nakamura approached quietly. "You fix fence with guards," he said. "But first, tell me something." Reeves waited. "Why you build this?" Reeves looked out over the camp where men on both sides limped from fatigue, yet felt strangely united by survival. "Because war makes us enemies," Reeves said softly. "But danger makes us human." Nakamura absorbed the words. They settled somewhere deep, somewhere untouched by uniforms. Then, unexpectedly, he bowed. A small bow, a sincere one. Reeves didn't expect thanks, and Nakamura didn't offer any. But in that moment, they understood one another not as combatants, but as men who had shared a storm and chosen against every instinct of war to protect rather than destroy. The storm had not only tested the scrap gun, it had tested them all. And the real battle reconciliation was only beginning. By dawn, the storm had passed, but left the world strangely quiet, too quiet for a camp that had nearly been carved apart by raiders just hours before. The clouds hung low and bruised, drifting over the shattered fence panel like an exhausted witness. Mud puddles reflected the pale morning light, each one a small reminder of the fear that had pooled there in the dark. Reeves walked across the compound with the slow, stiff gait of a man who had used every last reserve of strength. He'd slept no more than 20 minutes. His hands still shook, though he kept them hidden in his pockets. The aircraft scrap gun, still dented, still dripping, remained beside his bunk under a tarp. The guards had not confiscated it. No one dared touch it. Word had spread. The guards whispered about the American who built a weapon from nothing. The prisoners whispered about the enemy soldiers who had taken orders from one of their own. Some whispered about miracles. Reeves ignored the whispers. He had no interest in being a legend. Legends got people killed. He only wanted the world to settle to breathe again. But the world wasn't finished with him. Later that morning, Nakamura and 2 other guards approached Barrack 7 with unusual formality. Reeves was outside repairing a rain barrel gutter work they hadn't asked him to do. Reeves Nakamura called. He turned. "Yeah, you come with us," Nakamura said. Reeves wiped his hands on his tattered trousers. "Why, you arresting me for saving your lives?" The 2 guards stiffened, unsure if he was being bold or just tired. Nakamura exhaled. "No arrest. You come. Captain wants talk." Delaney overheard and hurried outside. "Walt want me to come." Reeves shook his head. "I've got it. You sure they might want answers you can't give without getting shot?" Reeves gave a thin, wry smile. "Then I'll talk carefully." Delaney hated when Reeves did that, said something both comforting and terrifying at the same time. Captain Hiroshi Tanaka, commander of Fukuoka Num. 2 was a rigid, stone-faced officer whose uniform always seemed to fit too perfectly for a man living in wartime scarcity. His reputation was exacting but not cruel, a rarity among prison commanders. He ran his camp like a spreadsheet, efficient, cold, predictable. Inside his office, Reeves stood at attention not out of obedience, but out of respect for stakes he did not yet understand. Tanaka studied him from behind a wooden desk littered with maps, supply charts, and reports from the previous night. "You built weapon," Tanaka said in English, more fluent than Nakamura's. "Yes," Reeves answered. "You built from scrap?" "Yes." Tanaka lifted a brow. "And guards?" "They follow your orders." Reeves shifted. "No. I offered direction." "They chose. That is unusual." Reeves didn't reply. Tanaka's fingers drummed the desktop. "Your weapon this air gun you intend use again?" "If raiders come again," Reeves said. "Or anyone who threatens the camp." "The camp," Tanaka repeated, tasting the word. "You prisoner. Why you protect Camp?" Reeves thought about it. A lesser man might craft a heroic answer. Reeves offered the truth. "Because people live here. Hungry, tired, scared. Yours and ours. I don't care about the math of sides. I care about the math of lives." Nakamura, standing behind Reeves, blinked at the phrase, "math of lives." He'd never heard war spoken about that way. Tanaka's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. "May I see weapon?" Reeves hesitated. Showing the scrap gun felt like handing over a fragile piece of his soul, but refusing was worse. "It's in my barracks," he said. "I can bring it." "No," Tanaka said. "We go together." Word spread like fire in dry grass. The captain was going to inspect the Americans' impossible scrap gun. Prisoners pressed against windows. Guards murmured among themselves. Even the cooks paused their rice scraping to watch. Reeves lifted the tarp and revealed the device. Under daylight it looked even less like a weapon, more like a failed plumbing experiment. Tanaka crouched beside it. "This saved the camp," he said. Reeves nodded. Tanaka ran a hand over the tubing. "Ingenious. Crude, but precise where it matters." Reeves sensed something he hadn't expected: admiration. "Can it kill?" Tanaka asked. Reeves answered plainly. "At close range, yes. But I didn't build it to kill." Tanaka studied his face. "Then why build?" "At all." Reeves swallowed. His voice was rough from the storm and sleepless night. "Because fear makes men dangerous. But protection, real protection, makes men human again." Nakamura stared at Reeves as if he were speaking some forbidden language. Tanaka rose. "You will repair it, improve it. You will teach guards how to use it." Reeves blinked. "Teach? Guards?" Tanaka nodded. "You have skill we lack. Raiders may return. Japan army stretched thin. This camp must defend itself." Reeves glanced at Nakamura, then back at Tanaka. "And what do I get for helping you?" Tanaka's face remained unreadable. "No punishment. Better rations for your barracks, extra blankets, access to tool shed without escort." Reeves rubbed his jaw. "And the prisoners, you treat them better. Fewer beatings, more rest days." Tanaka stiffened. The request was bold, dangerously bold. For a moment the guards reached for their rifles, but Tanaka raised a hand. You negotiate, he said slowly. Like soldier, not prisoner. Like a man, Reeves corrected. Tanaka held his gaze. The silence stretched so long it felt like a tightrope. Finally, Tanaka nodded once. Some concessions. Not all, but some. Then he surprised everyone in the yard, including himself. You helped my men, I help yours. A murmur traveled through the compound like wind. Reeves didn't smile, but something eased in his chest. Not peace, not forgiveness, not yet, but the blueprint of those things. That afternoon, while Reeves and Nakamura inventoried scrap tubing, a pair of prisoners approached cautiously Lieutenant Arthur Mac McAllister and a Filipino medic named Ramon Cruz. Delaney watched from a distance, anxious. Reeves Mac said, pushing his glasses up his nose. We wanted to, say something. Reeves paused, wiping sweat from his brow. Ramon stepped forward. Some of the boys are calling you a hero. Reeves nearly laughed. Don't. Heroes get expectations. Maybe, Mac said gently, but last night expectations didn't stop you. Reeves returned to his work. I didn't do it for hero talk. Ramon crouched beside him. Then why you risked everything? Reeves hesitated. The truth sat heavy in him. My crew died in that crash, he said quietly. Navigator, radio man, tail gunner. They followed me, trusted me, and I couldn't protect them. Mac and Ramon exchanged a glance, one that carried the weight of men who had lost too much too young. So when I saw this camp, these men, Reeves said, voice tightening, I couldn't fail another crew. The phrase another crew lingered in the air. The prisoners weren't just comrades to Reeves. They were the living shadow of the men he'd lost the second chance no one deserved, but he had been given anyway. Ramon placed a hand on his shoulder. Walt, you didn't fail them. You survived. Reeves shook his head. Survival isn't the same as redemption. Mac's voice softened. Maybe not. But last night, that was the start of something. Reeves didn't reply, because he knew Mac was right. Last night was the first time since his crash that he felt something break free inside him, something that had been locked beneath guilt, duty, and silence. Purpose. By evening, the camp felt different, not safer, not friendlier, but altered. Something subtle had shifted between prisoners and guards. A thin wire of mutual respect, or at least mutual dependence, now connected them. The scrap gun had forced both sides to acknowledge a truth war never wanted them to face. They needed one another to survive. As Reeves shaped new tubing beside the tool shed, Nakamura approached with 2 bowls of miso broth, thicker than usual with slivers of turnip. For you, Nakamura said, and for friend Delaney. Reeves raised an eyebrow. This generosity part of your captain's concessions, Nakamura shrugged, is part of respect. Reeves accepted the bowl silently. Nakamura lingered. Reeves, he said softly, you fix scrap gun tomorrow. After that, maybe teach me how work Reeves studied him. You trust me? No, Nakamura said, but I trust what you build. Reeves chuckled. Close enough. They stood in the dimming light, 2 men shaped by opposite nations, opposite wars, opposite loyalties, but sharing one strange, undeniable bond. They had survived something together. And survival, Reeves realized, was the strongest foundation peace ever got. But peace had a price, and the past was coming for him. Because somewhere beyond the horizon, the war was nearing its end, and when peace arrived, so would judgment, revelation, and the one thing Reeves was not prepared for. Facing the crew he could not save. The war ended not with a roar, but with a strange drifting quiet that settled over the camp like morning fog. A Japanese courier arrived breathless one afternoon, a crumpled communique in his shaking hands. Tanaka read it once, then again, before lowering the page as if it weighed more than steel. Japan had surrendered. For a full minute, no one guard or prisoner moved. It felt impossible that the world could shift so suddenly under their feet. Then murmurs rose. Some guards stared at the dirt, some at the sky, unsure whether their lives were ending or beginning. The prisoners waited, holding their breath, their bodies stiff with memories of camps that had turned violent in the final hours of the war. But at Fukuoka No. 2, nothing erupted. Nothing cracked. Because of one man with one impossible invention. The following morning, Tanaka summoned Reeves. For the first time, the captain removed his hat and placed it respectfully on the table. Reeves, he said, war finished. You go home soon. Reeves stood rigid, uncertain what emotion to feel. Relief. Guilt. Hope. Nothing fit. Tanaka continued, Before you leave, I must return something. He opened a drawer and gently placed the aircraft scrap gun on the table. Reeves blinked. You kept it. Tanaka nodded. I study it many nights. Not as weapon, as message. Reeves frowned. Message. Tanaka tapped the side of the scrap gun. This made from pieces of destroyed things, leftovers of war. But you give it new purpose. Not to kill, but to save. You make dead metal into symbol of life. Reeves swallowed suddenly, unable to speak. You used scrap to protect enemy soldiers, Tanaka said. That is not war. That is future. Reeves looked at the weapon, dented ugly, patched with makeshift fittings, and saw something he hadn't before, a reflection of himself. Broken, repurposed, holding together things that shouldn't have survived. Tanaka extended it. Take. Your invention changed more hearts than you know. Reeves accepted it with both hands. For the first time, Tanaka bowed deeply, not to a prisoner, but to a man. Two days later, American rescue teams arrived. The prisoners were thin, sickly, sunken, but alive. Reeves stood among them, the scrap gun slung across his back in a cloth wrap. A young officer approached with a clipboard. Name, the officer asked. Staff Sergeant Walter H. Reeves. The officer scanned a list, then looked up slowly. Reeves, you're the sole survivor of B-24 Ghost Orchid, right? Reeves's heart tightened. Yes. The officer hesitated, voice softening. Sir, you should know. 2 members of your crew survived the crash. They were sent to different camps. One made it stateside. He's waiting to see you. Reeves's vision blurred. The world tilted, not from hunger, but from the sudden weight of relief he never imagined possible. What's his name? Reeves whispered. Sergeant Harris. Reeves almost collapsed. Harris. His tail gunner. His kid brother in everything but blood. Alive. 3 weeks later, at a temporary U.S. base in Okinawa, Reeves stepped through the doors of a recovery ward. The room smelled of iodine and clean sheets, smells of a world returning to itself. There, sitting on a cot with his arm in a sling, was Samuel Harris. Young, exhausted, but unmistakably alive. Harris looked up, froze, then stood so quickly his cot nearly toppled. Walt, he breathed. Walt, that really you? Reeves didn't move. Couldn't. His chest felt like it would break under the force of everything he had held in since the crash. Harris crossed the room in 3 shaking steps and threw his good arm around Reeves. The impact nearly knocked them both over. You're alive, Harris sobbed. You're alive, Walt. I thought Reeves held him tightly, throat locked. I'm sorry, he choked. I'm so damn sorry I couldn't save the others. Harris pulled back, wiping his eyes. Walt, you didn't fail us. We went down together. The crash scattered us. That wasn't your fault. Reeves shook his head, but Harris grabbed his shoulders. You saved me once when that fuel line ruptured, he said. You saved the Orchie more times than anyone knows. And I heard what you did in that camp. You saved an entire crew of prisoners, and the guards too. Walt, you saved more people than the rest of us ever had a chance to. Reeves hadn't realized he was crying until Harris pressed a handkerchief into his hand. The guilt that had lived inside Reeves for so long loosened just enough for a breath to pass through without pain. That night, Reeves sat outside under the Okinawan stars, the scrap gun resting beside him. Harris joined him quietly. Still carrying that thing, Harris asked. Reeves nodded. It protected people who had nothing left. Harris leaned against the railing. What are you going to do with it now? Reeves traced one of the dents with his thumb. Maybe take it home. Maybe hang it in the workshop. Not as a weapon, as a reminder. of what Reeves looked up at the sky, vast forgiving, that even broken things can protect, that we're more than what war makes us, and that sometimes scrap becomes the start of peace. Harris smiled softly. You always were the quiet one. Guess you stayed that way. Just louder in the right moment. Reeves chuckled, a sound he hadn't made in years. The war had taken much from him. But in its final chapter, with a gun built from trash, he had rewritten a story he thought was over forever. He wasn't just a survivor. He was a protector, a builder, a reconciler. And somewhere across the sea, in a camp no longer fenced by hatred, Japanese guards told stories of the quiet American whose impossible scrap gun had saved them all, not with death, but with purpose. And from that purpose something rare had grown: forgiveness.